Okay, so we have one more thing we are going to do with trig, and that is finding an angle using the inverse trig functions, which sounds kind of scary, but it really isn't. When you think about it, the opposite of addition is subtraction, and the opposite of multiplication is division. And the trig functions have opposites as well. So the opposite of sine is inverse sine, and we write it just like sine, but we put a little -1 up there to represent that it's the opposite. And that makes sense because if you think about last semester when we were doing logical reasoning, we talked about how that minus sign doesn't represent subtraction or negative so much as the opposite. So for sine, the opposite is sine to the -1 or inverse sine. And cosine would be inverse cosine, and tan would be inverse tangent. Now, I don't have a TI calculator, on display here in this video, but if you were to look at that, you would just simply type the second key, which is the blue key on the calculator, and then either sine, cosine, or tangent. And when you do that, you'll see the cosine with the little -1 or the sine with the -1. Also, if you use the MyScript calculator app, which I keep bringing up and recommending because it's free and it's really easy to use, if you use that MyScript calculator and you just draw it in, kind of like I'm drawing on my tablet right now, if you use that, you just type in sine -1, just like I did. And anyway, I think when I say finding an angle using inverse trig, everybody gets kind of scared, but actually it's really the easiest thing you can do. And we do that, I'm erasing here, we do that and set it up the same way as we have been, by labeling our hypotenuse, our opposite, and our adjacent. So I'm still trying to erase this. Now we're going to use the angle that has the x located there. So based off of this x, we're going to label the hypotenuse, which is my 17, my opposite, which is my 5, and the adjacent, which is the one that we're not using. So I've said in the previous video that you have two pieces of information you know and one that you're trying to find. And in this case, we know two sides, and incidentally, you can find the adjacent as well by doing Pythagorean theorem, but I digress. So I'm going to circle the two sides that I know, and I know the opposite is 5, and I know the hypotenuse is 17. So that is going to tell me which trig function I'm going to use. And if I go back to SOHCAHTOA, that tells me if I'm using opposite and hypotenuse, that's sine. So I'm going to write this equation out like I have been. That's going to be sine of my angle. The problem is I don't know what my angle measure is, so I'm going to put x equals my opposite, which is 5, over my hypotenuse, which is 17. So I can't divide by sine, which, to be honest, a lot of people try to do that because the sine appears to be multiplying against the x. But remember, sine is an operation, and the opposite of taking the sine is not division. Okay, so sine by itself is not a number. Sine of an angle is, but we can't divide by sine. So when we're looking for the angle, we've got to get rid of that sine. And just like if we were adding 1, then we would subtract 1 to get rid of it on that side. The opposite of sine is inverse sine. So that means we're going to not multiply, but distribute inverse sine across this equation. And so when I do that, when I distribute it across, it cancels out on the left side of the equation. I'm just left with x. But then when I distribute it over to the other side, on the right side of the equation, it doesn't cancel out. So I have sine -1, or inverse sine, and then 5 divided by 17. And that's all that you do. You type it in the calculator, second sine, to get that inverse sine, and then you put 5 divided by 17 and close the parenthesis. Though you are not required to close the parenthesis for that to work. And I would write this in my MyScript calculator exactly the way I have it right here, and that will get you the right answer. So unlike the trig with the calculator, where sometimes the equation results in you multiplying and sometimes it's division, these are always going to be the same. So let's do another one. I'm going to clear all my drawings here. Okay, so I've got another one. I'm going to change my pen color just to be different here. Okay, so this time I'm going to use this one as my x, and I'm going to give you this side, which is 4, and this side here, which is 7. And so I've got to first start by labeling my hypotenuse, my opposite, which is this one right here where the 4 is, and my adjacent, which is the 7. And I'm going to look at my SOHCAHTOA. And the two pieces of information that I know is my opposite and my adjacent. Now, if I go back over to SOHCAHTOA and I look at which one uses O and A, that's going to be TOA. So I set up my equation like I set up all my other equations. Tan of my angle, which I don't know, but we're calling it x, equals your opposite, which is 4, over your adjacent, which is 7. So now I've got to get rid of that tangent because I need x by itself. And remember, we can't just divide by tangent. It has to be tan of a tangent of an angle measure is a number, but tan by itself is just an operation. And the opposite of taking the tangent of something is not division. It is, however, inverse tan. So I'm going to distribute inverse tan across this thing, and it cancels out the tangent of x, and I'm just left with x by itself. And then when I distribute it to the other side, I'm left with tan to the -1, or inverse tangent 4 divided by 7. And I put that in the calculator, and that's it. Or I type it in my script, and the only thing you wouldn't do is, if you're writing that in the MyScript calculator, or for that matter, in the other, you would not put x equals. You would just write tan to the -1, parenthesis, 4 divided by 7, close parenthesis. And I am sorry that I don't have a calculator in front of me, because it would have been nice if I actually could tell you what the answer to that is. But hopefully this has helped you, and if you still have questions, you're welcome to either message me through Remind, or you can send me an email, and I may or may not check it often enough. But anyway, I hate to send out these things on a 3-day weekend, but if you are still confused, this hopefully will be of some benefit to you. Have a good day.